If this video looks very bad, know that it is nothing to do with your monitor or YouTube's particularly zealous use of compression. I filmed all my recent videos using OBS, but I found out after recording this footage that my video output had dropped from the recommended 4000 kbps for a relatively stable 1080p to a much worse 2500 kbps. Hence, this ugly mess of colours that dominates your screen. It should be sorted for next video, but I realise it isn't the best start for a new series. Sonic GT was a quite popular fan game a couple of years back, adding momentum to the 3D Sonic formula to an extent that was, and still is, unrivaled in official Sonic games. As you can imagine, it was the recipient of plenty of Sega hire that man talk, and while that vocal crowd is somewhat diminished after agreement that Frontiers was quite good actually, there is still certainly a large group that wants a style of play back in their Sonic games. I played GT a while ago, on a laptop. For all you need to know about how well that played, even with pretty much every graphical setting dropped to their lowest, just know my recordings' lengths are double that of what the in-game timers show. But with a much beefier computer to work with now, I was hoping whether I could turn this into a new series. So, let us begin. But before we can actually begin GT's adventure mode, we first need to complete its tutorial. It makes sense why GT is hesitant to drop you straight into the first level. It has significantly more freedom in what accents you can use where than most Sonic games, allowing for an unrivaled sense of flow once you master it, with the obvious caveat of there being far too many abilities to realistically introduce you to them individually. So, all we need to do is quickly breeze through this odd sterile lab setting, and then we can begin, right? Well, yes, theoretically, that's exactly what you need to do. Problem is, much like SRB2 before it, Sonic GT has the worst default controller layout you could possibly come up with, in that it doesn't work. So, before we can do anything at all, cue an embarrassing amount of messing around with just about every single control, both on and off screen. Even this was hindered by the fact that GT does not like you setting multiple commands to a single button, which sort of inevitably needs to happen when using a controller, meaning it set options to select to left stick, which promptly nearly softlocked me in the options menu. Even with all of that sorted, we still need to address the fact that GT has an extremely friendly camera that just loves flipping and flopping all over the place at the slightest change in angle. With all that considered, it took me nearly 7 minutes to complete the tutorial, which in total consists of a few basic jumps, a couple of springs, some light speed dashing, and a few grind rails. Rather embarrassing. But with the tutorial completed, we can actually move on to the adventure proper. Because yes, while you almost never see anyone talk about it, Sonic GT does have a story connecting the levels. It's quite basic, yeah, but considering that this would hardly be where the devs would be focusing on, it's adequate. In essence, before, during and after Ocean Paradise, the first level of the game, you learn that Dr. Eggman has kidnapped Raid the Flying Squirrel and has goaded Mighty into chasing after him. Meanwhile, Sonic and Tails are just chilling on the beach. Cutscenes are delivered pretty much like a visual novel, with characters being represented by a selection of images selected based off how they're feeling. Models here are actually pretty good, representing their emotions rather well, and are usually looking just a little more dynamic than actual renders. You know Nibrock.rock? These look like most of his work does. But the voice acting? It's not bad per se, but it is filled with obvious differences in mic quality between voice actors, who quite often have some really awkward line deliveries. But you don't have to sit through too much of this initial plot setup before Sonic and Tails are interrupted by muffled cries for help, translating into your first steps into Ocean Paradise. You get roughly a minute to stretch your legs for the first time while trying to locate the person in trouble, who repeats the same voice line over and over. If nothing else, this is a great motivator to find them, if only so they'll shut up. Immediately, you get to see just what Sonic GT is about: flow. All of your abilities, when combined together effectively, will allow you to run at incredible speeds for huge lengths of time, as the level design rarely, if ever, forces you to stop and make precise movements. If you can route it properly, these huge sandboxes can be traversed in no time at all, as you speed over water, zip across rails, and roll down mountains. This short excursion is capped off with a short fight against a few egg pawns over the source of the noise, which is where the feeling of incredible speed promptly crashes to a halt. For all of GT's strengths, it does not have an interesting combat system, so this fight against these egg pawns still feels like much of what you find in any modern Sonic game pre-Frontiers. In other words, a lot of homing attacks. To mostly no one's surprise, the cries for help were coming from Mighty, who'd been ambushed and buried in the ground on his search for Ray. He's happy to see you, and after a short exchange where Sonic decides the two will search for a nearby Eggman base on foot while Tails scouts from the air, he becomes playable. You're still stuck with Sonic for the rest of this adventure though. Now though, the rest of Ocean Paradise opens up to you, and you can continue chasing the endorphins that pumps into your brain every time you perfectly land a jump from one slope to the next, rolling to maximise your momentum gains. I die after being sniped by Crabmeat's energy blasts, after having ran for a good 20 seconds and failing to collect a single rank in that whole time. Generally though, Ocean Paradise is mostly a breeze, being GT's obvious clone of Seaside Hill and Ocean Palace, and following their example of being easy beginner levels. Any failed jump will usually result in just falling into water, and with Bumper Engine's physics coming into play, more often than not, water is simply a vast flat surface to run across. Another thing you'll quickly run across is how, despite the massive size of its levels, Sonic GT does a great job of making sure you'll never get turned around or lost for more than a second or two. This is usually done by marking the path forward with blatant opportunities and gimmicks to help further your speed, meaning that even if the level only occasionally has giant arrows carved into the surface of its paths, you'll always know which way to go. Music is also top notch. Ocean Paradise's theme was composed by TrueChaos on Nuclear, and they've done a perfect job with instilling that sense of wonder and mystery that Ocean Paradise has, as well as anticipation for where we may end up next. Finally, Sonic GT has a great ranking system, rewarding you with stars throughout the level for completing exciting maneuvers or avoiding dropping in speed. At the end of the level, just in front of an absolutely massive Eggman base, you're of course scored by time in your rings count, but these combo stars are also counted to reward players for basically being as cool as possible. Ocean Paradise concludes with a few more minutes of cutscenes, basically just explaining why your next location is Hilltop Zone. Basically, Sonic and Mighty find nothing throughout their searching, with Tails alerting them of Eggman's new mining operation in Hilltop. Meanwhile, Dr. Eggman explains to Ray how he simply bait to lure Mighty to him, where he'll dissect the armadillo to analyse his cell. Using that information, he plans to upgrade the casing of his new Ultra Heavy Bandit line, allowing him to maybe defeat Sonic once and for all. This plan, of course, seems liable to veer off course as the three amigos reach Hilltop, ready to destroy its resident commander robot and shut down Eggman's mining operations. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully next episode we'll have better quality video, and for now, ciao.
Yeah.